because as badass as this cover is from Lynn Hansen, it's just a little snippet of what we can expect inside of that book as well. I thought that the stories were just incredible. To be quite honest with you, Rebecca, I gotta say that I don't have my HWA membership yet. I don't know what's been keeping me, but I read stuff like this and I'm really inspired to do it, even if I only use it just so I can vote on Stokers, because I find it really rare that you could read a book. I mean, there's 20 stories in there. Mileage varies with everything that you read, I found, but there wasn't a single dud of the book. Everyone was just fantastic in its own right, and I think you did an absolutely bang-up job putting all this together, which is the first thing I want to talk about. I warned you that I might ramble a little bit. I'm really excited about this book and getting to talk to you about it, so I apologize. I'm going to shut up a moment and turn the mic over to you, because I'd love to know what your process was for putting this anthology together. I mean, was it by invite only? Was it an open submission? How did that
okay, so
go about?
I mean, the majority of my anthologies, well, no, I'm going to say about half of the anthologies that I've curated have been open call. And it's just really been, this is the third one that was invite only. And the way that it came to fruition, and I feel more and more shame admitting this to people, but it was the AuthorCon, not this past one, obviously, but the one before.
Yeah.
You know, it was after hours. I was sitting around with two of my friends, two people that I am actually two of probably the writers that I'm closest to in this business, Holly Ray Garcia and Douglas Ford. And we were I'm going to say slightly intoxicated, but it could have been even more than that. And we were just sort of spitballing ideas for anthologies, because I had just come off of Generation X, where both of them had stories in that anthology. And then there was the invite, the Anne Rice tribute anthology, Dancing in the Shadows. They were both in that. And so we were just sort of talking like, oh, what are we going to do next? And blah, blah, blah. And one of them mentioned like, let's do cannibalism. And I'm like, cannibalism, what? And then we were just sort of goofing off. And then it just, after the more we talked about it, the more I thought, what a really cool idea this would be. Especially because I have found that I've really enjoyed historical fiction over the last couple of years. It wasn't something that I enjoyed previously, especially not within the horror subgenre, but there had been a couple of stories that had come through in previous anthologies that had that quality to them that I really enjoyed. So I thought, wow, this would just be so neat to be able to take sort of historical fiction and horror and just sort of mash them together. And pow, that's how it came to be. Yeah. And so right there at AuthorCon, I tried to ask a few people that I knew would be perfect for the collection. What I really wanted more than anything was a complete range of styles. In the past, the anthologies that I've done have been very genre specific. You know, there's like a story, like a psychological fiction one. There's a queer fiction one. This, because it was more thematic than genre specific, I was worried initially that it would only attract sort of splatter writers. And I didn't want that. I enjoy splatter. I enjoy reading splatter, but it's not sort of the primary genre that I look at. And so I wanted a real range. And, you know, there were a handful of authors that were right there at AuthorCon that I was able to ask. And then I went home and just sort of, you know, contacted a few more on social media or by email and said, you know, this is what I'm doing. And a lot of these authors had never worked with me before, and they took a chance. And I'm extremely grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, me too. And I think that you absolutely nailed it as far as, you know, exactly what you said, where they do really run the gambit of styles on there. I mean, you've got, you know, hard-boiled detective stories. You've got, and I'm almost, you were talking about shame before. I'm almost ashamed to think of, 20 or the year 2000 as historical, but it really is. It's 23 years ago.
Yeah,
And you've
right.
got Jeff Strand talking about that as well. And of course, his own brand of humor that
Yeah.
it's just, and he still manages to bring it such a grotesque story. And I think that's what really nails this one for me too, is that I find with a lot of anthologies where you've got the very specific theme, it can very much seem redundant after a while.
Right.
I mean, you even have
Right.
one story that, sorry, spoiler alert, but you don't actually see the cannibalism actually within the story. It's just simply, it's a nuanced, and it
Right.
works so well. And I find that every story really approaches the cannibalism thing so well. Some of it, I mean, it's got about cannibalism, but you end up finding you find that it ends up being still part of a plot twist of a story they didn't see coming.
Right.
And it works so well.
Right. Right. Yeah. And some of the authors have told me now, looking back, they've said, having it be this cannibalism theme and really force them to push themselves, because they couldn't use cannibalism as this sort of twist at the end. It was already sort of going in, there's going to be cannibalism.
Yeah.
So they had to instead think of, well, how am I going to interpret this differently? Writing the way that I write. And so, we do have, right, sort of some erotica horror, some psychological, some splatter, some comedic, some feminist, it's there's something for everyone in there. And I can say that with complete honesty. They're really, if you're a horror fiction lover, you're gonna find something in there. You just are. So
completely agreed. And it sounds so cliche, I mean, everybody, that's the $1 million marketing, sort of statement, is there's something for everybody, but there really is in this one with all the different styles. And like you mentioned, I mean, there really is. And what a wonderful way too to find your new favorite authors. I mean, this is, for the folks that already have an overwhelming TBR pile, this thing's going to tip it over, because every author that I hadn't read before that's in here, I now want to read their stuff.
And I wish I could take credit for this turning out as good as it did, but I got to be honest, a lot of it is just luck. Luck,
Yeah.
and 90% of it is just these authors and their talent, and the fact that they brought it. It wasn't just sort of, none of them phoned it in. All of them gave me these absolutely gorgeous, amazing stories, and there isn't a weak link in there. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
Yeah, me too. Were there any surprises, Rebecca? Because as you mentioned, that a lot of these or all these authors are folks that you knew.
Yeah.
And I assume that you've probably read most of them, if not all of them. Were there any surprises as far as what you expected them to bring to the proverbial, the literal table of the cannibalism, that you're like, holy crap, I didn't see that coming from this person? Or
Yes. I mean, I do have to say that probably a good half of these writers I didn't know whatsoever before approaching them to join.
okay.
I mean, I knew of their work, but I didn't know them personally. And so the fact that they did take a chance on me really does, it really does mean a lot to me. But I was familiar with all of their work. And yeah, for the most part, they all brought their individual styles that they're known for. So, fans of feminist horror, they're going to get it with Gwendolyn Keist. They've seen it in her previous work. They're going to see it again here. Same thing with, Elizabeth Massey. Ronald Malfi brings the psychological horror, as does Daniel Brahm. That's what they're known for, and that's what they bring. But there is one author that really surprised me, and that would be Jeffrey Ford. So Jeffrey Ford is a master of the speculative fantasy, sort of straddling that fantasy horror, sci-fi realm. And so I automatically expected from him that I would get something super, super speculative. And he wrote this piece that is so awesome. And it's so unlike anything that I'd read by him before. And certainly he's super versatile. I mean, obviously he can write everything, but it's not necessarily what he's known for. And so he wrote this piece that takes place during the gas crisis of the 1970s that follows a serial killer, because I mean the 70s were the number of serial killers just seemed to explode in America.
Right.
and so that's what he was tackling, sort of in the spirit of like BTK and all of these other big name serial killers that surfaced at the time. And that's what his piece is about this serial killer named Victor and his reign of terror and sort of how he ends up getting caught. And it surprised me in the best way. But it's fantastic.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I absolutely love that story as well. And it's so creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with the point of view that he used as well, it almost felt like it was you, like you were the killer and you're like stuck in his skin as he's walking around, and then what a cool story. And I love the fact too, like, was it what was the maximum word count on this? Because I couldn't help but think that like it felt like there was just no real break in the action. Like all the stories just felt like they're absolutely just perfect length, just breakneck length, and then boom, you're on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a writer, my sweet spot is 4,000. So that's what I usually ask for from writers, just because that's what I'm used to sort of looking at. But I told them as long as it was between 2,000 and 6,000. There are a couple of the stories that kind of eke over that limit a little bit, like Texas is the Reason, the JFK one. Brian's story, and then Bridget's story about Let's Hear It for the Boy, that's about the AIDS crisis, ekes a little bit, but it doesn't feel long. Like none of them sort of feel like they're all the exact length they're supposed to be, I guess is what I should say.
Yeah, I know, and that came across glaringly. I mean, you don't really notice it until as you're reading, you're like, everything just felt like it just fit perfectly. Like it was just such a good length, just long enough for the character development to really get invested in the story, and then without being long in the tooth, no pun intended. It just again, it just kind of finishes up, and then you're on to the next one, which I thought was awesome. One thing I'm really curious about too, Rebecca, is that you mentioned, of course, that it was an invite only for this particular anthology, which is a little bit different from your previous 6 anthos. With that in mind, was it always the first story that folks sent into you? I mean, obviously, you've got a who's who of really everybody that's people should be keeping an eye on. So you've got everybody is at no doubt at the top of their game.
Yeah.
It's no. I think at this point you should certainly expect that the best from these particular writers. But when they sent you something, did they already have a story in mind, or did you kind of work with them to pick certain stories, or maybe this one's better than this one, or
no? I mean, yeah, for the time period, I'd asked them because I did want a range, and I didn't want anyone choosing the same event I mean, statistically, you would think that would not be the case, but you just never know.
Yeah.
And so I put up a Google Doc, and I just said, once you have your time period, just throw it in there. And there were a couple of writers that, I mean, right off the bat, like as soon as I asked them, they're like, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, awesome, that's great.
Yeah.
And then there are some that were kind of like, nah, I'm thinking this, I'm not quite sure. And then there was one writer who actually wrote 2 stories because he's a super perfectionist, and he was torn between 2 different events in the same sort of time period, and he sent me both of them, and we looked at both of them, and then we ended up going with one of them, and I think he's using the other one for maybe another project. But otherwise, I mean, what they sent me was what they what I went with. I mean, there really wasn't a story that came in where I thought, oh, this just it's not working. I mean, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm really, really fortunate with this project because there wasn't an author that I had to chase. There wasn't an author who kind of phoned it in. They all just brought it, and they really committed to it. And especially because I know that a lot of them had these other huge projects going on at the same time, and yet they still did this. So I am appreciative. I am very fortunate. I'm lucky with this.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that statement as well. Happened even, when we were at AuthorCon last month, had an opportunity to meet some of these authors, and I know they're extremely busy because, and I don't think that, and maybe I'll start to sound like a broken record by the end of this conversation with you as well, but these truly are, I mean, it's, in one sense, I want to call them the new breed of authors, the up and comers, but they're not really up and coming. I mean, they're here.
Yes.
This really is the new breed of writers. Then you have them all compiled here. What was it always going to be 20 stories as well, Rebecca, or did that just kind of matter on the lengths and sort of who was available to write and who wasn't? Or
I mean, I like to have anthologies that are around 80,000 words, and so figuring out the 4,000 sweet spot, for me, it's always 20 has sort of always worked. I had an anthology that was 25, and then I also had another one that was 16. And so, and they worked. But for the most part, 20 seems to work, and I think it worked really well here. Yeah, I think that any longer, and maybe the book might have been just too long. I think it's at a really good length where it is. Yeah.
Agreed. And I always find when I honestly, I don't get a chance to review as many, collections and anthologies as I would like sometimes. So I was super appreciative that you trusted me to, with this book, to review it, to cover it, to have this conversation with you here. So I'm very grateful for all of that. And I'm always curious, what did you have a process for what order you put them in, or was it a matter of like creating a crime scene on the floor kind of thing?
Yeah.
How did that all work?
Yeah. So I do have a method too that I traditionally use for anthology ordering. And so, but then these came in. So the first came in, and I just sort of read them, edited them, kind of put them aside. And as they started to file in, and I myself, just for my own sanity, just to sort of get a feel for what we had in the collection, I was putting them in a grid chronologically myself, not necessarily how they came in. I was just like, oh, okay, no, I'm getting this one, from the 1980s, and I'm going to sort of save a spot here, and this one's going to be during the Civil War, and it's going to be here, and I'll save this spot. But as they came in and I was sort of putting them next to one another, I realized that the flow was working really well chronologically. And then I thought, so by the time I had about half of the stories, I decided I'm going to go chronologically with this. And it worked, especially looking at the subgenres. And they're really, I mean, there are a couple that are sort of side by side that are similar in feel, but for the most part, they're very, very different. You're going to get one that's a little splattery, and then the next one's going to be quieter, and which I like. And I also like mixing up the point of views. I don't like putting, a ton of first person point of views next to one another, and it worked out that way, that it wasn't sort of repetitive. And so, yeah, no, it just worked. I mean, it's the puzzle pieces just all came together very, very, very smoothly.
Cool. Yeah, and it was neat because because you did have that variation and you didn't have a continuance of a similar style or a POV or whatnot. It was, I never really got a chance to get settled. And I think that's where it really felt like that just constant, roller coaster of just going up and down with these awesome stories. So, and of course, it's kind of interesting too, because speaking of the order of things, in my review, I refer to them sort of as the maitre d' of this whole collection, where you've got none other than Wrath frickin' James White leading the charge with a fantastic forward. I mean, he's obviously, if anybody knows anything about Wrath, this is his cup of tea, bite of steak. This is his wheelhouse. So this is just what he does. So that's super cool too. Was it always Wrath, or was it something? I mean, I can only imagine Wrath would have just been chomping at the bit to do this when you asked him to.
I mean, he's so busy. He's so
Yeah.
busy. And I mean, I am a huge fan of succulent prey
Oh, I know, right?
as it is extreme horror for anyone who is kind of
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know if I like the splatter. It's so, I mean, it's so smart. It was one of those books that I think I may have even read it in one sitting. Like
Oh,
and
wow.
it's not a short book.
No, no.
Um, because it's so creepy, and if anyone who hasn't read Succulent Prey, it follows this serial killer who does the most depraved things to his victims, and yet Rath writes it in a way where you are almost on his side for a
Yeah, like
while,
very
and
sympathetic.
very sympathetic. And so and you really have to be a gifted writer to be able to pull that off. And so, I approached him, and at first I think that he was just, I mean, he's just juggling 1,000 things. And it was probably right around the time that KillerCon was going
Oh,
on.
jeez.
And so he's already like, he has all of these things in the air.
Yeah.
And but he agreed to do it, and wrote this fantastic just overview of cannibalism in literature, but also just the human condition, and why we are so fascinated and yet so repelled by the concept of cannibalism, and why it works so well as a horror trope.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you feel makes it work so well also, because I mean certainly it's almost like, there's so many nuances and like social commentaries, for example, with the zombies, but we're not really going to meet a zombie. I mean, I think the closest thing we came to zombies
Right.
was probably, COVID, where
Right.
everybody, where the diseases, the things that could kill us were all the other people. But
Right.
of course, when it comes to cannibalism, and certainly with a lot of the serial killers and all the other atrocities that kind of incorporate that cannibalistic theme in the stories, these are very much embedded in history as they're told, very much in the present. It's all around us. Why do you think
Right.
that cannibalism is such that works as such as a fantastic trope in horror?
I think it's because, and I think of a friend of mine who is a huge horror fan. She reads, everything,
Yeah.
watches, every horror movie that comes out. But she has made really clear to me that she's not a fan of realistic horror, of serial killers, any that sort of subgenre. And her reasoning is that can really happen, right? And so if you
Right.
watch something, zombies, vampires, any boogeyman, any of these things, they're not, you can shut off the TV, you can close the book, and rationally you can say, well, this isn't happening. No one is in my closet,
Right.
waiting to, I don't know, stick out tentacles or whatever. That's not happening.
Yeah.
But there could be, your neighbor could be a serial killer ready to abduct you,
Sure.
and so you can't really rationalize that away necessarily. And I think with cannibalism is one of these horrors where the humans become this almost like a speculative monster, because with a serial killer you're like, well, we can dissect them psychologically. Cannibalism, you cross a line where you're not coming back from,
Right.
and you really do become this kind of monstrous entity that I don't think can be really rationalized. And so that's why I think cannibalism is so frightening and so repelling, but also the fact that it's happened. There is,
Hmm.
I think that there are three types of cannibalism in literature, right? Or even just in history. So there's this cannibalism for necessity, right? So we have things like the plane crash in Chile,
Right.
with the soccer players. They have to do it. They have to do it to survive. It is what it is. It's
Yeah.
not a monstrous act. It's an act of just, sheer survival. They're not
Do or
killing each
die.
other, right?
Yeah.
They're eating the dead.
Yeah.
There's that. But then there is sort of this other extreme of, the ones, the killers that are doing it as a fetish, as a kind of deriving this kind of pleasure from it.
Right.
And there's that. But then there's sort of this middle ground where you wonder, maybe it started, you know, as a survival tactic, but now it becomes a sense of, you know, pleasure. And I think a lot of the stories that are in American Cannibal go into that middle ground, and I think that that's a really frightening place, because it's not sort of the monsters that are doing it, you know, purely out of this evil sort of sense, and it's not just, oh, I'm doing it because I have to do it, but I'm not going to do it if I don't have to. It's now well, you know what, I kind of like it, and I can blend in with everyone else, but I'm also kind of doing this really horrific thing. And I think a lot of the literature that's coming out with cannibalism lately, things like Katsu's like The Hunger, it's very much straddles that, you know, because we have the Oregon Trail, and yet if you've read The Hunger, you know that there is this also this aspect of this monstrosity that's going on at the same time.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Definitely, you know, it's almost where I guess folks would take to that, and then suddenly, you know, we become the other people, because for them it's almost normalized for them. And I think there's even some cultures that are still existing today that are still very much in that mind space, or I guess I don't know if you'd call it a mind space, or that lifestyle, I suppose, where it's sort of part of their culture. Some of the, you know, various you know, tribes that they probably haven't seen a civilized person in ever in some cases.
Yeah.
And then I know certainly with you know, the Dahmer files that were on Netflix a little while back, all of a sudden you had this person where he was almost, there's a couple, and that's what I hate about the show too. If I'm sure if you've seen it, where it's almost where he seems somewhat sympathetic as they do the flashbacks, but then he also realizes that he is a monster and there's just no reason for it. And I think that was probably the most horrific aspect of that particular show, where it just goes beyond reason.
Yeah. I mean, that show in particular, I think, did bother me because it made him so sympathetic.
Yeah.
I was really glad for the one episode where it focuses on one of his victims, and it sort of humanizes, and it brings us back to,
the
let's
deaf
not
guy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, let's. There are a lot of people who have, you know, kind of sketchy childhoods, you know, and come from broken homes. And they don't do these kinds of things.
Exactly.
So let's look at, you know, what he did to this lasting, you know, hole that he left in a lot of families' lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I really enjoy about a lot of these stories as well, is that they really go into that, where sure, some of them are sympathetic, but then it's, you almost pay for having that sympathy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, I'm going to make you sympathize for this particular character rather, but you're going to regret it, because we're going to see this thing through together as a reader and writer.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I can think of a few, like Holly Ray Garcia's, you know, you have someone that falls under the spell of a cult leader. You know, you have Douglas Ford, you know, sort of this character who seems to be just in love. You know, it just seems to be in love. He's doing it out of love. And then, you know, Evie Knights, you know, during Prohibition, what happens when you are an alcoholic, you know, and sort of what links do you go to? And so it's absolutely. I would say quite a few of the characters in here are sympathetic, and maybe that's why it is so scary, because maybe we can put ourselves in their shoes and understand and realize, oh my God, you know, this could be me. I could be the monster.
100%. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Speaking of putting things in a certain way too, Rebecca. So when you were putting this anthology together, because I know, of course, this is your seventh one that you've put together.
Yeah.
Does it get any easier?
It does, actually. It does. It's still, I am so type A, despite being late for a few things that you know about. But I am very type A, and I think in the very first anthology that I put together, I was a little too, I think, rigid about things. And you know, as anthologies have gone on, I think I've developed kind of a system. I've developed a method, and I also am definitely, I approach the anthologies now as from a writer's perspective rather than an editor's perspective.
Okay.
Which I think makes a huge difference. I mean, there have been editors that I've worked with who have been so fantastic. And looking back, I realize it's because they themselves are writers, and they understand. They understand what it means to, pour something out onto a page and sort of give it over, and trust someone with it. And also I've dealt with editors who don't get that, who are only editors, or they've only published things under their own imprint, and they don't sort of understand, and they don't have maybe the empathy that I wish that they would have had. And so I hope that I have that empathy, and I hope that I treat the writers with the kind of respect that I would like to be treated. I hope that's always my goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think that you would have seven anthologies out there if people weren't, picking up good information about you and wanting to submit this and be a part of your project. So I'm gonna guess you're probably doing something right.
I hope so. Thank you.
They clearly didn't give you the crappiest stories, so
no, they did not.
I think that speaks pretty volumes as well.
Yeah.
You did say something really interesting, because of course, for everybody watching this, you're not only just an editor, but you're a very well-established author yourself. And you mentioned about, it's almost, I guess, a bit of a fine, well, I don't think you mentioned fine line, but it came across like it's almost a fine line between being the writer as well as the editor, where you're not just pure editor. You also have that, empathetic writer side of you. How does that change things? I mean, what difference do you feel that makes, and to the writers, and how does that change or help you to adjust your approach? Maybe you've got a first initial reaction to an editing, and then you filter it through a writer's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that, at least with open calls, I always chose stories that were relatively clean as far as editing, and I always chose stories that were just beautifully written. Like, it was the writing first, and then kind of narrowed down from that pile the storyline. So for me, the writing's always first. And so I have never been a writer who has done a lot of line editing or a lot of kind of rearranging of things. I'm very hands off as an editor.
Okay.
Because I understand that my style of writing is not your style of writing. Right. And if I'm taking your story, it's because I like your style. And so I'm not going to try to take your style and squish it into mine. And I think that's, I don't understand editors that do that. If you want a collection that's going to sound like you're writing, write it yourself.
Right, exactly.
I think that's the advantage of having an anthology, is having this range and having these new voices that you're able to read. So I think that's helpful as a writer first, is being aware of sort of what you are, and then not trying to impose it on someone else. I think it's really important that there is a sense of trust between the writer and the editor. And a lot of times, you're submitting a story to someone that you have no relationship with. You don't know them at all. And so this trust relationship has to emerge very, very quickly. And so when an editor says, like, I need to tweak this a little bit, or let's look at this, I want to put a comma here. As a writer, you have to sort of give up a little bit of trust and say, yes, you see the forest for the trees, because as writers, we don't. I don't care how many times you read your story over, you're going to miss a typo. There has never been a story that's come in, and some of the writers that I've worked with are the most meticulous writers on this planet, and yet I'll always there's always something, and it's because we're human. That's just the way it is.
They're very often uncorrect things on in our brains as well, or we'll read something that might be spelt wrong, but our brains will correct it for us, and it's right.
Right, exactly. So I think that it helps. I think it helps being a writer first, and also because I think that I do have that empathy. I know I don't want to sort of color this as if I've had all of these horrible experiences with editors, because that's not the case at all. I think I can count them on one hand, maybe, and they really haven't been that terrible of an experience. But I have had them, and I know what it's like to be treated badly, or at least in a maybe less than respectful manner, or not being kept up to date on what's going on, or and so I try to do the things that I would want as a writer, I guess.
Cool. And do you think that would be some of the, or maybe the best advice that you would give somebody else that was crazy enough that they wanted to put together their own anthology and have fantastic writers in there as well? I'm not sure if, because you've got so much experience doing that, Rebecca, if people have actually come to you and said, hey, how do you do this? Where do I start? What do I need to know? What should I watch out for? How did you screw up so I don't do it? Or
no, I know I have. I mean, and the best piece of advice I can give someone is check your ego, because 90% of why an anthology is successful is the writing. It's not you as the editor. Like, you're like the collector, like you're the person that's kind of putting everything together.
Sure.
But if the writing isn't there, it's going to fail. I don't care, what kind of magic, you think you're going to weave. And so that would be the best piece of advice I could give to an editor is don't go into this thinking you're the star, you're the VIP. You're not. You're not. Just, I mean, there are editors out there certainly that are known for just putting out beautiful work. People like Paula Guerin and Ellen Datlow, and certainly I will grab anything that Ellen Datlow puts together. I will buy, because I know that she puts together an absolutely gorgeous product. But what makes it gorgeous is the writing that she selects. And so that's what I would advise editors to just remember always.
Cool. And on the flip side of that too, Rebecca, what would you say as far as anthologies go? What do you feel that brings to a reader that maybe a single story doesn't bring, or maybe a magazine with just a couple of stories in it? What do you love so much about doing the anthologies, and why are you still doing them after six successful runs of them?
Yeah,
what keeps you going?
No, it's the variety as well. And as someone that does, I've taken a hiatus from book reviewing for a while, but I was doing reviewing, and I would always choose, I would say, give me the collections, the short story collections, or the anthologies. And the reason being is because I know there is that variety, and there's always, and if it's done well, maybe if one story doesn't speak to me, the next one is going to, like, it's going to be my, my preference. And it doesn't mean, and it also means, just because one story isn't something that is my cup of tea doesn't mean that it isn't someone else's. And so that's what I really like about anthologies and short fiction collections, is that there is something for everyone if they're done correctly. And it's what I gravitate to as a reader, to be perfectly honest. Some of my favorite writers out there, like Joyce Carol Oates, her long stuff is fine, and it's fine, and I do enjoy it, but I'll always choose her short fiction first, and because that's just what I enjoy.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to put that too. I know there's certainly some authors out there as well. I mean, I can think of some, Clive Barker, Poppy Z. Bright. I mean, as much as I love their non-fiction stuff, their short fiction is just gold. I don't know what it is, but they just excel at doing that. As well. I know one of the newer guys too, Eric LaRocca as well. I mean, he's got a great debut novel out there as well, but his shorter stuff too is just brilliant. Really good stuff. So and to kind of flip things around a little bit, so I understand that, speaking of collections, you also have a collection coming out in the next little while as well, I believe. The
I am, yeah, I
White
am. I'm
Trash and
coming.
Recycled Nightmares.
That's true. White
Cool.
Trash and Recycled Nightmares comes out October 10th from Dead Sky Publishing,
Okay.
and I am super excited about this because it's been a few years in the making, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the pieces. It's about 80% previously published, but a lot of the anthologies that these pieces have been, they are long gone. They're on the market somewhere, I'm sure, but it's been quite a few years, and so I'm thrilled. I can't wait to see it come out in October.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see it either. What can you tell us about it? Is there any specific themes, or is there anything that we should kind of watch out for, or?
Yeah. So the reason why it has the title it has is because it was, so for a while I was, the way that I was coming up with story ideas was I developed a sort of sense of, well, sleeplessness, I guess. As soon as I turned 40, all of a sudden my ability to sleep through the night, fall asleep, sleep well, just in general, just completely evaporated. And no matter what, I went
So
to the
that's a thing then.
doctor.
Okay, I thought it was just me. Apparently, that's a thing.
I guess it's just old age is what it's just, I guess. And I went to the doctor and everything, because I got to tell you, I was the kind of kid that, when I was little, it'd be bedtime and I was excited. I was like, yeah, see you later. I'm not like that kid that was fighting
Me
my
too. It's like,
parents.
great, I'll go read a book and get a couple of chapters out, and this is perfect. Listen to late
Exactly.
night, horror radio, or
Absolutely. It was, it was like the best time of the day. But that's sort of just poof gone when it's, after I turned 40. And so I would wake up in the middle of the night multiple times, still do. But I would keep my phone next to the bed, open to Notepad. And I also started having these very just vivid dreams. And sometimes they would be nightmares or nightmarish. And as soon as I woke up, I got into the habit of just writing down everything I could remember. And sometimes it would make sense, and sometimes it was just sort of weirdness, just sort of images here and there. But I put down everything I could possibly gather. And then it would just go away for a while. I would just sort of set it aside, and then months later revisit the notes and try to make something of it. Okay. And so most of the stories that are in this collection are just that. They're recycled nightmares. So
that's so
they're
cool.
Yeah, they're pieces that God only knows where they're coming from, somewhere in my subconscious apparently. But and so they're everything. They're everything from speculative pieces to psychological to feminist to quiet to very different from my previous collection that was all sort of realistic psychological horror.
Okay.
But I'm excited about it. I'm excited. I hope people like it.
Me too. I love the premise of it, because of course when I first saw the title, I'm thinking flashbacks. Like, I used to live in a trailer park back in the day, so that's what I was thinking. It's the Tales of the Trailer Park, but this is so much cooler. It's like a nightmare journal of yours, and that's pretty awesome. So I now, are the stories in this one, would you call them very personal, or are you just as surprised as we're going to be when we read them?
It's definitely less personal than Horrors Hiding in Plain Sight, which was, some people would read that collection and say, gosh, this reminds me of, so and so in your life, and it'd be like, no. But I guess really looking back, I'm like, wow, that's sort of, apparently I've become my own personal, I don't know, Freudian therapist or something with that collection. But this, there are a few things, like I always have a habit of setting all of my stories in places where I've lived or have spent a great deal of time in. In my 20s, I used to move every year, if not multiple times in the same year, to the point where people would say, are you wanted by the laws? There's something that we need to know.
Witness protection.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like, it was getting a little sketchy. But so I have just this whole sort of lineup of living living spaces in my memory, and I travel a lot. Especially prior to the pandemic, I would travel multiple times during the year, different places, and so my favorite places often became settings for books, and so that part is very personal. Every location in the story collection are places where that I know very well.
Cool.
But other than that, there really aren't. I guess I don't know, unless maybe it's become this sort of mysterious therapy session that I'll discover later. I don't know.
I don't give it to like a dream, what do you call it, interpreter or something, and they could be like, all right, we need to sit down and talk about this.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So I'm definitely looking forward to going on that nightmare journey with you. That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And it comes out October 10th, so we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Are there pre-orders that are going to be available for that?
It's actually up for pre-order right now.
Oh, I will
Yes.
100% put that in a link down below then.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be out in.
Sorry,
So right now, the print and the ebook are up for pre-order. There's also going to be an audiobook, and so that should be out by the fall as well.
And who's doing the audiobook? I take it now, or
I do.
Or you can't say.
I don't know if I don't know if I'm. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if I.
Okay. Do you need to make a phone call or?
But she's my dream narrator. She's the coolest of the cool. So I'm very excited about it. Yeah, and
Great.
she's wonderful. She's the kind of narrator that will message me and say, hey, can you give me some background on this character? And she really gets into it like a professional actor. So
okay.
Yeah.
What were they at the AuthorCon as well?
She was not. No. Oh, it was Dead Sky. Dead Sky was not. But they are going to be. I don't know when this is going to drop, but they are going to be at. Gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the convention, but it's going to be Memorial Day weekend here, the last weekend of the month, in Maryland. They're going to be there. Dead Sky will be there.
Oh, okay, cool. Very cool. So you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, Rebecca, where you were saying about how very much like your anthologies, it's not about you, it's about all the writers. Yeah. This might come as a surprise for anybody watching this, but this show is really, my podcast has nothing to do with me. It's all about all the amazing guests that have been on here, such as yourself. Yeah. So I want to give the stage to you, Rebecca. What do you have in the pipeline right now that that we can also perhaps look forward to, or that maybe you're most excited to be able to jump onto after you're done chatting with me and kind of working on? What do you have going on? More anthologies, stories, novellas?
So I have a novella coming out next month. It's coming out June 2nd, and it's in a 3-novella collection titled Table for Three. And it's me, Douglas Ford, and Holly Ray Garcia. We each have a brand new novella in this collection. 100% of the proceeds, every single penny, goes to Texas area food banks.
Oh, okay.
So it's something that Holly Ray Garcia actually put together. Yeah. She came up with the idea. She orchestrated everything, and the three of us just sort of wrote pieces. They're all food horror.
So you're all about the food.
Yeah, apparently.
From Cannibals to the real other things.
Yeah, I guess this really is my own little therapy session here, Rick. When we come down to it. But yeah, that comes out June 2nd, and so my novella Rock of Ages will be in there, and I'm very excited about that. I have a few short stories coming out here and there. I have one coming out in Kangas Khan's new Halloween anthology that's not quite titled yet, but it's coming out in September. There is an anthology titled, and I want to say the title is Deadly Disasters, but I may be wrong. It's all natural disasters. Okay. And so everyone has taken on a different natural disaster. Candice Nola is at the helm of that.
Very cool.
And mine is, it's called Wolf Like Me, and it takes place in Boston during a vicious ice storm, and I'm very proud of that one. That one I think comes out the end of fall, maybe winter of 2023, 2024.
And is that through Candace's Uncomfortably Dark imprint?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So I'm very, very excited about that. So yeah, I mean, I was offered a few chances to edit this summer, and I regretfully I had to turn them down. I need. Last summer, you know, I spent on Cannibal, and I want to sort of use this summer to get back to my own writing, and so I'm excited to kind of get working on that.
Very cool. Do you find that's got to be such a challenge, I would think, to to work as an editor while you're also working as a writer, and I mean it's really very different mindsets.
It is, and the big difference is, you know, when you're an editor of an anthology, you have, you know, 20 people depending on you. It's not sort of this like, oh, I want to work on my own stuff. And certainly, you know, you have deadlines, and people have, you know, contracts that they have to fulfill. But for the most part, if you don't do it, you're only letting yourself down. And with an anthology, if you put it off, or if you sort of put it, you know, to the side and let something else, you know, take a greater importance, you are letting down other people. And I think so that's the difficulty with choosing to edit something. Once you commit to that, you really can't you can't let it down. You can't let those people down. And so
definitely, especially with like Cannibals, you know what they're capable of.
Yeah, right, exactly. As I mentioned, actually, I think I have a note in the back of that anthology that I don't think I ever want to be alone in a room with any one of these 21 people. You know, during dinner time.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Definitely. You want to like just take your dessert early and take it to go or something and get out of there.
Like, see you later.
It's been swell.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated. It's nice digging into the meat of this anthology, and you know, really getting to know what the anthology means to you, what it's going to mean, I think, to a lot of the readers who haven't picked it up yet. So again, for those that have not, because I just realized that in my little section that I have here, there we go. Got to check that out. So, and of course, I love the bookmark that came with it here as well. So that's fantastic. And of course, she got all the warnings on the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is so.
And thank you to Lynn Hansen for designing that cover.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, and terrifying, gorgeously terrifying, like all of her work. So yeah.
No, it's great. I definitely I mean, I work for a long-term care place, so reading this at lunch break, I know I got a few looks, so but that's okay. What was there anything else that you wanted to maybe talk about as far as the anthology goes, or anything else that we maybe haven't touched on? We're like, man, why the hell does anybody ask me this question about Cannibals? This has been on my subconscious. I need to get this worked out in therapy. Why won't anybody talk to me about this?
Yeah. Oh, gosh, no. Okay. Oh, I do want to say that the collection's available on audiobook, and the audiobook narrator that did it, Mark Johannes, he's a professional actor, and this is actually the third anthology that he's narrated for me, and he does a fantastic job. He really gets into each character, and Facebook actually canceled his account for posting about American Cannibal. They thought it was a little too risque. He posted about it early on and joked that he was narrating a cookbook, and I guess someone on Facebook did not find that as hilarious as I do.
That's awesome.
And they actually censored his account, which is terrible. Yeah. It's terrible. So please give Mark Johannes some love if you see him in any of the shows that he's on, or if you catch any of the books that he's narrated. He's just fantastic. I can't say enough wonderful things about him.
Yeah. Does he have a website that he has control over that isn't going to cancel him, or?
He is on IMDb, Mark Johannes with a J, and you can find him on Audible. Just do a search for him, and all of his books that he's done will pop
Okay.
up. And yeah, he's fantastic. He's
Good.
fantastic.
So everybody that's on Facebook that wants to get a hold of the audio version, give the bird to Facebook and go over to his website. I take it, is that or audible.com?
Yeah, Audible, just audible.com,
Audible,
and you'll find it. Yeah.
Perfect. And he does every one of the stories in this book?
He does, and he takes
Wow.
on different personas, and he's just, yeah, it's you'll just lose yourself. You'll lose yourself in it.
That's cool. That's cool. So I'll definitely put a link down below for that. Maybe you know, kind of outside of the chat, Rebecca, if you don't mind, maybe sending me a link to that too, so I can properly direct people to that, because that sounds super cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read the book myself, but it'd be really cool to kind of hear it acted out, performed out. It's especially for some of the various scenes. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the ones in particular, but I don't want to give any spoilers out for the folks that prefer their Cannibal fresh and spoil free.
Exactly. Fresh. That's the I'm going to use that adjective from now on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
fresh. Well, thank you very much again for putting together such a fantastic book. Fresh doesn't begin to cover it. I mean, I think it's just absolutely exudes talent straight from Raph James White all the way through all the stories and all the way to your warning at the end of the room, or at the end of the book, about being in the same room with all these individuals. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure.